Chapter 26 of the Countess of Charny by Alexandre Dumas, translated by Henry Williams. This Librivox recording is in the public domain. The Trial of the King. On the 7th of November, the Girondists began the indictment against the king, assisted by the fatal deposit of papers in the iron safe, although those were missing which were confided to Mademoiselle Campan. After Gamaine's opening the press, which was to have so severe an effect on the prisoners in the Temple, Roland had taken them all to his office, where he read them and docketed them, though he vainly searched for the evidence of Danton's oft-cited venality. Besides, Danton had resigned as Minister of Justice. This great trial was to crown the victory of Valmy, which had made the defeated King of Prussia almost as angry as the news of the proclamation of the Republic in Paris. This trial was another step toward the goal to which men blundered like the blind, always accepting the invisibles. They saw things in the mass, but not in detail. Alone on the horizon stood the red guillotine, with the king at the foot of the scaffold on which it rose. In a materialistic era, when such a man as Danton was the head of the indulgent party, it was difficult for the wish not to be outrun by the deed. Yet only a few of the convention comprehended that royalty should be extirpated, and not the royal person slain. Royalty was a somber attraction, a menacing mystery of which men were weary, a whited sepulchre, fair without but full of rottenness. But the king was a different matter. A man who was far from interesting in his prosperity, but purified by misfortune and made great by captivity. Even on the queen, the magic of adversity was such that she had learned not to love, for her broken heart was a shattered vase from which the precious ointment had leaked out, but to venerate and adore, in the religious sense of the word, this prince, though a man whose bodily appetite and vulgar instincts had so often caused her to blush. Royalty smitten with death. But the king kept in perpetual imprisonment was a conception so grand and mighty that but few entertained it. "The king must stand trial," said the ex-priest Gregoire to the convention, "but he has done so much to earn scorn that we have no room for hatred." And Tom Paine wrote, "I entreat you to go on with the trial, not so much of this king as the whole band of them. The case of this individual whom you have in your power will put you on the track of all. Louis XVI is useful as showing the necessity of revolutions." So great minds like Paine and great hearts like Gregoire were in tune on this point. The kings were to be tried, and Louis might even be allowed to turn state's evidence. This has never been done, but it is good yet to do. Suppose the charge against the Empress Catherine, Pasiphae of the North. Who will say there would not come out instruction to the world from such a revelation? To the great disappointment of the Rolands, we repeat, the papers in the iron safe did not compromise Dumouriez and Danton, while they earned Gamain a pension, little alleviating the pangs of his ailment, which made him 1,000 times regret the guillotine to which he consigned his master. But they injured the king and the priests, showing up the narrow mind, sharp and ungrateful of Louis, who only hated those who wanted to save him. Necker, Lafayette, and Mirabeau. There was nothing detrimental to the Girondists. Who was to read the dread indictment? Who was to be the sword-bearer and float over the court like the destroying angel? Saint Just, the pet of Robespierre, a pale young man with womanly lips who uttered the atrocious words. The point was that the king must be killed. The speech made a terrible impression. Not one of the judges but felt the repeated word enter his soul like steel. Robespierre was appalled to see his disciple plant the red flag of revolution so far ahead of the most advanced outposts of republicanism. as time progressed. The watch over the prisoners was closer, and Clary could learn nothing, but he picked up a newspaper stating that Louis would be brought before the bar of the house on the 11th of December. Indeed, at 5 that morning the Reveille was beaten all over Paris. The temple gates were opened to bring in cannon, but no one would tell the captives the meaning of the unusual stir. Breakfast was the last meal they partook of in company. When they parted, the prince was left playing a numerical game with his father, who kept the truth from him. "Curse 16," said the boy on losing 3 times running. "I believe you are bad luck." The king was struck by the figure. At 11 the Dauphin was removed and the king left in silence, as the officials did not intrude for fear he would question them. At 1 o'clock Santerre arrived with officers, and a registrar who read the decree calling, quote, "the prisoner Louis Capet," before the house. The king interrupted to say that Capet was not his name, but that of an ancestor. He stopped the reading on the grounds that he had read it in the papers. As it was raining, they had a carriage in which to carry him. On alighting, Santerre laid his hand on his shoulder and led him to the same spot at the bar by the same chair where he had taken the oath to the Constitution. All members save one had kept their seats as he entered. This one saluted him. The astonished king recognized Gilbert. He wished him good day. "Are you acquainted with Dr. Gilbert?" asked Santerre. "He was my physician once, so I hope no ill feeling will be harbored because he was polite to me." The examination began. Unfortunately, the glamour of misfortune vanished before duplicity. Not only did the king answer the questions put to him, but he did so badly, stammering, hesitating, trying to evade direct issues, chaffering for his life like a pettifogger arguing a party fence case in a county court. The king did not appear at his best in broad day. The examination lasted 5 hours. Though he refused refreshment offered, he asked a grenadier for a piece of the bread he saw him eating. On crossing the yard to step into the carriage, the mob sung with marked emphasis the line of the Marseillaise about "the impure blood should fertilize our furrows." This made him lose color. The return was miserable. In the public hack, swaying on the black, pestiferous, vile pavement, while the mob surged up to the windows to see him, he blinked his eyes at the daylight. His beard was long and his thin hair of a dirty yellow hue. His thin cheeks fell in folds on his wrinkled neck. Clad in a gray suit with a dark brown overcoat, he mumbled with the Bourbon's automatic memory, "This is such and such a street." On remarking that Orleans Street had been changed to Égalité on account of the duke having dropped his titles, though that did not save him from the guillotine, he fell into silence and so returned into prison. He was not allowed to see his family, and had to go to bed without the meal with them. "Ah, Clary," he said to his man as he undressed him, "I little dreamed what questions they were going to put to me." Indeed, almost all the inquiry was based on the contents of the iron safe, which he did not suspect was discovered from having no idea that Gamane had betrayed him. Nevertheless, he soon sunk to sleep with that tranquillity of which he had given so many proofs, and which might be taken for lethargy. But the other prisoners did not bear the separation and the secrecy so tamely. In the morning, the queen asked to see her husband, but the only arrangement offered was that the king might see his children on condition that they should not see their mother or aunt any more. The king refused this plan. Consequently, the queen had her son's bed put in her rooms, and she did not quit him till removed for trial by the Revolutionary Tribunal, as her husband was by the Convention. Clary, however, worked communications with a servant of the princess named Turgy. They exchanged a few words and passed notes scratched with pins on scraps of paper on the lady's side. The king could write properly, as he had writing materials supplied since his trial commenced. By means of a string, collected from the pieces around the packets of candles, Clary lowered pens, ink, and paper to Princess Elizabeth, whose window was below that of the valet's room. Hence the family had news of one another daily. On the other hand, the king's position was morally much worse, since he had appeared before the convention. It had been surmised that he would either refuse to answer any interrogation, like Charles I, whose history he knew so well, or else that he would answer proudly and loftily in the name of royalty, not like an accused criminal, but a knight accepting the gage of battle. Unfortunately, Louis was not regal enough to do either act. He so entangled himself that he had to ask for counsel. The one he named, fearing to accept the task, it fell to Malesherbes, who had been in the Turgot ministry a commonplace man, in whom little did any suspect contempt for death. On the day of his execution, for he was beheaded, he wound up his watch as usual. Throughout the trial, he styled the king sire. Attacked by a flow of blood to the head, the king asked for Dr. Gilbert to be allowed to attend him, but the application was refused, and he was brutally told that if he drank cold water, he would not have such a fullness of blood. As he was not allowed a knife to carve his food, unless a servant did it before the guards, so he was not let shave but in the presence of 4 municipal officers. On the evening of the 25th he wrote his will, in which he said that he did not blame himself for any of the crimes of which he was accused. He did not say that they were false. This evasive response was worthy the pupil of the Duke of Viguillon. In any case, the 26th found him ready for any fate, death included. His counsel read the defense, which was a purely legal document. It seems to us that if we had been charged with it, we should not have spoken for the law, but let St. Louis and Henry IV defend their descendants from the crimes of their intermediate successors. The more unjust the accusation, the more eloquent should have been the rejoinder. Hence the convention asked in astonishment, "Have you nothing more to say in your defense?" He had nothing to say, and went back to the Temple. When his defender called in the evening, he told him of a number of gentlemen who were pledged to prevent the execution. "If you do not know them personally," said the king to Lamoignon Malherbe, "try to come in touch with them and tell them that I will never forgive myself for blood shed on my behalf. I would not have it spilled to save my throne and my life, when that was possible. All the more reason for me not allowing it now." The voting on the 16th of January, 1793, was on 3 points. Is Louis guilty? Shall there be an appeal from the convention to the people? State the penalty. To the first question was the answer of 683 voices, yes. To the appeal question, 281 ayes and 423 noes. The third decision of the penalty was subdivided into death, imprisonment, banishment, or death with the people allowed to reduce it to imprisonment. All tokens of approval or displeasure were prohibited, but when a member said anything but death, murmurs arose. Once there were groans and hisses when a member spoke for death, when Philippe Egalite cast his vote for the execution of his kinsman. The majority for death was 7, and Vergniaud uttered the sentence with deep emotion. It was 3 on the morning of the 20th Sunday. The illustrious culprit was up when Malesherbes bore him the news. "I was sure of it," he said, shaking hands with his defender. For 2 days I have been trying to find if I have merited my subjects' reproach for what I have done in the course of my reign. I swear to you in all sincerity, as a man about to appear before his Maker, that I have always wished the happiness of my people, and have not framed a wish contrary to it." The death warrant was officially read to him, and he was allowed to choose his own confessor. The name of one had been already written down by Princess Elizabeth, whose confessor this Abbé Edgeworth was. End of chapter 26. Recording by John Van Stan, Savannah, Georgia.